Hi, you've reached a holiday edition of the Signal Watch. I'm your Yuletide host, Ryan Steens. For some holiday cheer, join me in our chorus of co-contributors as we give the gift of holiday movie discussion, talking films both nice and, less nice. We'll examine Christmassy artifacts of the 20th century, merrily explore the 21st, and try to put it all in peppermint perspective. Stay tuned. We're gonna try to make this jolly. Happy holidays and welcome back to the Signal Watch. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Steens, and with me today is
Laura Maxwell Scott.
Laura Maxwell Scott, welcome back to the Signal Watch. We've seen you all too infrequently around these hallowed halls of late.
Oh, I'm sorry. There's a pandemic still. We're still in it.
Yeah, we're still in it. Tiger King's having a whole sequel at this point that I'm not going to watch any more Tiger King and look back to it. So, but that and Ted Lasso are the two things you've been around for since March of 2020. So, but now you've returned to us for the holidays, coming home for the holidays. And what film have you brought with you?
I'm sneaking in with The Apartment by Billy Wilder's Apartment. That's not who it's by, but it's Billy Wilder's Apartment.
We're all staying at Billy Wilder's apartment. And why did you select Billy Wilder's film here, The Apartment?
Yeah, this is a little bit of a departure for me. It's a film that I find very curious. I'm not even sure if it's a Christmas film, really. It takes place during Christmas time. It's mostly in the time between Christmas and New Year. So technically it works. I just find this film very curious. It is not something that I grew up watching. I like it. I think I like it. I think I like a lot of things about it. But I just want to talk about it because it's a little weird. It's tonally a little weird.
It is. This was only my second time to watch it. I don't remember when I first watched it exactly, but it was within the last 10 years. I know that. It's been fairly recent history. And kind of like I'd seen Sunset Boulevard and a couple other Billy Wilder things. I was like, this kid might be onto something. This Billy Wilder
might be kind of good. Actually, I will tell you the reason I had seen some other Billy Wilder films too, but I had a lot of Billy Wilder shaped holes in my filmography watching. Actually early pandemic, I went on a Billy Wilder kick. And sort of, like at some point, I do want to come back and talk about Sunset Boulevard. I think that's a great film to talk about, too. Very different, I think, from this one. Some similarities, maybe. And I'd seen some of his other films, and I'd seen Sabrina and Some Like It Hot. Now, I think I watched more recently. And then I also only saw The Apartment recently at the beginning of the pandemic when I sort of was figuring out Billy Wilder's pretty good. So I'm not going to pretend to be a Billy Wilder. I'm not an expert on Billy Wilder. I do not know his entire filmography. I know a lot. I know, Double Indemnity. And I'm familiar with a lot of his films, but certainly not all of them. And so tonally, it's very different from, you sort of like you were saying, Sunset Boulevard, and then Some Like It Hot. It's sort of where these two things come together, and they call it a romantic comedy, but it's weird.
Yeah, I would not take my first date to see this. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I can see that. And because it's not like a haha funny romantic comedy. And I guess just off the bat, I should say big content warning, suicide. And there's a lot of holiday films, or at least one I can think of, that suicide plays a major plot point in. But yeah, it did sort of remind me of um, these movies are very different, but the Royal Tenenbaums, I'm not saying that right, and Almost Famous both have suicide scenes or attempts in them, but the whole movie is more light and funny, but also dark. Does that?
Yeah.
I feel like both of those were probably influenced by this film.
It's entirely possible. I think that the film definitely uses the holiday and the kind of unspoken melancholy that can, and it's not unspoken that much anymore, but, you know, you grow up with Christmas as being, you know, it's elves on the shelves and, you know, mania with candy and all this. And then you kind of hit adulthood and Christmas is something very, very different. And especially, I think, because they framed this as neither of these people, well, she has her brother-in-law and sister, but she's not necessarily with them because it's this bold new adventure for her. We find out why she's with them, and he has no family at all. He's just lives for his job, essentially. So you really do get the framework of, you know, because of the heightened experience of the holiday season, how things are, it just works as a really sharp, stark contrast. So
at what point do we do the Mike Bell presents the story of the film?
You can do it now. You've introduced it, so you might as well carry
Mike Bell
it through.
Presents. The Apartment is a film in which Jack Lemmon's CC Baxter, aka Buddy Boy, is who works at Consolidated Life in New York City, which is a building that is so large that it reminds me of Jester at UT, where you went, where it has its own zip code. It's so large that they stagger the start times for every floor because they have to move so many people. It is an insurance company, and he has an apartment in the West 60s near Central Park that he lends to some of his upper management at his office. He lends his key to his apartment so they can use his apartment for their affairs and trysts. And then hijinks ensue when it turns out one of those girls is somebody he has his eye on.
Yes. I mean, just spoilers. It's Shirley MacLaine. And she's the elevator girl. So you meet her all very innocently in the film, and turns out the guy who's the head over all of those guys he's been loaning the key to, or at least is it powerful and enough above all of them, now wants the key, as it turns out, to be with Shirley MacLaine. Yeah. So it has this kind of, the movie that I think Billy Wilder was almost responding to with this one, to me, is The 7-Year Itch, which was something he'd made 5 years earlier. Which, based on a play, which I understand the play is far racier than the actual film. And apparently Wilder believed he was going to make the play, and then they kept telling him, no, you can't do that. No, you can't do that. No, you can't do that. And he got really frustrated, I guess, during the process. But that is about an exec, not a high level, big company executive. He's like a small print publishing executive who stays in for the summer, and turns out Marilyn Monroe has just moved in upstairs, and all the fantasies he has of what their romantic trysts will be, and all of this. And this felt to me almost like a conversation with that movie, which I had not seen the first time I saw The Apartment. Of Shirley MacLaine met Fred MacMurray by one of these summer trips.
It's the old story. It's the family goes away for the summer, it's in Hamilton too. The family goes away for the summer.
Right.
The boss hooks up with the young thing in town. And then, summer ends, the family comes back and it's back to the wife and so on and so forth. I can see that. I've heard also, well, there's some big overall themes I definitely want to talk about, but I guess there were a few films. Is it Brief Encounter that this was like a film in the 40s that he would have seen, and two people have an affair in one of their friends' apartments. And I think he sort of started thinking about, what about that guy? What about the guy that has the apartment? And then I guess there was some sort of Hollywood story that I think at the time that he first started thinking about making the movie, it was far too racy to make. And this is a very adult film. And certainly there are things that are coded in it, but like, it's just kind of adult across the board, both in the debauchery, but also, the loneliness and the themes and the sadness. And I think the film has a lot to say about capitalism and also intimacy and human connection and being alone in a sea of people. We should probably talk a little bit about that opening, which is the opening of the film is pretty amazing. It is a voiceover, but you see Jack Lemmon is talking about all the people that live in New York City. And again, he works in insurance. And you see him at his desk and it's a forced perspective shot where the desks in the front are bigger, the ones in the back are smaller, and it just looks like this sea of anonymity of which, Jack Lemmon is one person, and trying to make connections in that. And you have all of his bosses that are bringing these girls by, which sort of suggests a level of intimacy, but then, there's not really a lot of human connection there, I guess is part of it too. And then sort of in your conversation with like the whole summer thing, certainly there's something to the fantasy or having an affair, and Fred MacMurray's back in this one as, was it Sheldrake?
Yeah.
And he's awful. But he's the guy who's talking to Shirley MacLaine. He has the restaurant that he takes all of the girls that he dates from The Office to, that he's clearly taking her to now. That is sort of one of those, it's a Chinese food place in a basement tiki bar where the idea is you wouldn't be seen. And, sort of giving her the line about like, oh, I'm going to leave my wife. And she's like, I never asked you to do that. I never asked you to leave your wife. And, but then he'll have another conversation with somebody else and be like, these girls, you go out with them one time and they want you to leave their wives. And so anyway, you can see it's very transactional, and just how the value of the human life, right? Like, again, it's sort of like when you work in insurance, it goes back to double indemnity. Like, what is the value of a human life? Like, is it worth more if you throw them off a train?
Right.
Like, is it, and there's again, spoiler, but there's a scene in this where Sheldrake takes Shirley MacLaine, takes, what is her name? Fran Kubelik, Miss Kubelik, to the apartment, and they're exchanging Christmas presents, and she's bought him like this album from the restaurant that they used to always go to, that he just leaves at the apartment, and he gives her a $100 bill because he can't even be seen shopping for her. And that becomes her suicide note, in a sense, to him. It's just an envelope with his name on it and then the $100 bill inside. And when he gives that to her, it's like, okay, well, that's what, I guess, she sort of stands up and starts getting undressed, and he's like, what are you doing? And it's very robotic. And she's just like, well, you paid. So it's like very transactional. I think I started talking about the opening of the film, and then I just like went and way into the middle of it. But that you just sort of see the whole setup is this guy is just sort of an everyman. Like you said, he doesn't have really any family. He kind of knows he kind of knows his neighbors, but gets to know them in a very New York way. And I feel like this is important to the film too, because it's about, for a film that does take place at Christmas, like you have Fran Kubelik and you have his neighbor who's clearly Jewish, and a lot of his neighbors are clearly immigrants, which I feel like is really important to the Billy Wilder story. And on one hand, there's a lot of confusion and mixed up identity, and he really, Jack Lemmon's character, C.C. Baxter, Buddy Boy, really tries to hide from everyone that in his apartment building what's going on, and sort of pretends that it's him bringing people over and drinking all the booze and making all the noise. And his neighbors don't know, they know him well enough to know there's always a party in that apartment. And then also not well enough to know that it's not really him. But then it's like that guy who's a doctor is going to be the guy who stays up with him all night when there's a girl that overdoses in his apartment to keep her alive. So it's like that thing where you're like, we're anonymous until we're not, until we need each other. And it's him that says, what are you going to do with your life? Like, basically, are you going to be a mensch, or are you just going to be this guy who he thinks is having all the parties and basically doing all that sort of treating the girls badly and so on and so forth.
Yeah. I mean, he really is able to act as a cipher because he's intentionally or whatever, within the company, they're all facing the same direction in this massive floor of, just desks. I think they were like 4 across and an infinite number going back. I mean, it's done cartoonishly. That said, for one of my prior jobs, I once walked onto the floor at an Intel where all the cubes were, and it dwarfs that. And it was immediately soul crushing. It was one of the weirdest experiences I've ever had professionally. Because I came off this elevator assuming things would be kind of broken up as things are when you usually come into a building, but it was roughly the size of, I would say, larger than a football field. Mm-hmm. And it was nothing but cubes, all the same size. And they don't have offices. They have, and this is supposedly for equality, right? That's how they sell it to the people there. Mm-hmm. So if you need to work with someone or you need to take a call, they have glass, rooms all along the walls. But aside from that, but anyway, the anonymity that he's able to live with, and you do definitely get the thing of the guys don't really care who he is. He's an apartment to them.
Right.
He's an empty apartment. And he's willing to put up with all kinds of stuff. I mean, there's some things that they don't quite, sort out in the movie. Like, I was like, you're sleeping on those sheets? Like, right.
It's a little gross. They don't, because they do show him clean up, like, clearly all the booze bottles and like mention, like, you got to replace that. But they don't get that detailed, and that's pretty gross.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's just, it's the sheer loneliness of what he's kind of going through, and then kind of the late revelation. I mean, so much of the attention is put on the fact that she attempted to kill herself. I mean, that's the back half of the film. Mm-hmm. And then in the back quarter of the film, he's like, oh, I tried to do it too.
Right. So one of the things that's sort of amazing about this film is how economical it is and how many things are placed and then come back. From the very start where, you first realize that somebody is using the apartment and he has to spend all night like out on a bench in the park, that he gets sick. And then he has to track down his key because somebody exchanged his key for like the executive washroom. All the way to, we have a Chekhov's gun moment where he says, she spends the night, and he comes home on Christmas. We should probably talk a little bit more plot, but he doesn't, there's a lot of dramatic irony in this too, in that for a long time, that she's going to his apartment with Mr. Sheldrake and doesn't know that it's his apartment. And he knows he's lending his apartment to Mr. Sheldrake, but doesn't know who's coming with Mr. Sheldrake. there. And he puts it together at this Christmas party after he's been stood up by her, and for tickets for the Music Man, which Mr. Sheldrake gave him so that he could take some girl to his apartment. She after this $100 bill situation, and after having a conversation with Mr. Sheldrake's secretary, where she's basically like, the secretary's like, he does this all the time. Like, here's a list of girls that were before you. And you can only imagine there'll be other girls after you too. And then on top of that, just the exchange of the $100 bill as a gift, when she's given him a gift that's actually meaningful to her. And he sort of keeps worming his way back into her life after I feel like she keeps trying to break up with him. Anyway, yes, she does take his sleeping pills, which we've seen earlier in the film. Because again, great placement of storytelling. And that's when he sort of says, yes, once I did this, and for this girl that now she just sends me a fruitcake every year. And I tried to shoot, I took a gun, but it's all both her suicide attempt with the overdose, and then also him talking about it and how he got surprised by the police officer and shot himself in the knee. Like, there's a lot of comedy in it. And then it's also very brutal at the same time. At least with hers, with the doctor neighbor coming in and like slapping her. And, and before that, he's taken somebody home that he met in the bar. And, there's all this like confusion, and it's sort of madcap, but then it's also very sad and serious at the same time. So that's one of those tonal things that. Yeah.
I mean, you're going back and forth, cross-cutting on the Christmas Eve scenes of Sheldrake and what is her name? Miss Kubitsch? Not Kubitschek.
Kubelik.
Miss Kubelik. And they're having the whole like, oh, you're paying me like I'm a hooker, transaction. Meanwhile, he's I counted, he has 13 cocktail olives around for martinis. She'd be, it's played for comedy. It's all comedy.
Right. But really he should be on the floor.
He should be dead. Yeah. I mean, they should be calling an ambulance at that point. But he's with this woman who's sitting there telling him about how her husband is locked up in Cuba, and she's a married woman and she clearly doesn't care.
Right.
And it has the whole her shooting the straw paper at him sequence, while the cross-cutting with the other sequence that's just devastating.
Yeah.
And somehow it still works as they're going back and forth between the two.
I think it does. But I'm not sure why it works. And that's one of the things I'm sort of curious about. Like, it's fun to see a movie and be like, why does this work for me when it shouldn't? And there's some things I'm not sure do totally work. But then I'm like, I don't know. Does it work? Maybe. Jack Lemmon is Jack Lemmon. And so he's doing all of these very funny physical comedy things in it as well. And he's so likable. But even when he's talking to Fran at one point, inviting her to the Music Man, like, he's clearly been stalking her.
Yeah.
And like looked up her card and knows everything about her, down to like she had her appendix out, which is creepy, except it's Jack Lemmon, who's like the least creepy psychotic character, seemingly. And this movie does have a little bit of a nice guy thing. Like, on one hand, I think it does work because it's two people having a human connection, but at the end, I'm not sure I want them to really be together. I want them to be really good friends and play Jim Rummy forever.
I totally get that. I absolutely, I get that they needed to put the happy ending on the film, or probably he wasn't going to get the money for the movie.
Right.
Like, well, you're going to have these two are going to end up together. You got to let people like walk. You've just shown these people are both suicidal. You can't have them not together at the end, which I'm sure was probably the first draft. But yeah, no, I agree. They don't seem like they're on the same wavelength.
They don't, but they do have like a real, like they've gone through a real human experience together. So like, there's part of me that is like, yes, like go spend time with people who care about you. That's good. But there's another part of me that's like, I'm not sure they end up together. That doesn't totally make sense.
Well, the movie
to me.
doesn't say they do. What they say
Right.
is, he says, I'm in love with you.
And she says, shut up and deal.
Yeah.
Which is the last line of the movie, and a fantastic line.
Yeah. It really is. I'll be straight up. I don't love Shirley MacLaine. Like, not that long ago, I tried to watch Irma la Douce and got 15 minutes into it and was like, this is why I don't love her. And it's another Billy Wilder movie with Jack Lemmon at that, because I wanted to watch it as kind of a follow-up to The Apartment. And but in this movie, there's something about whatever the character is she's inhabiting and the stuff that she's doing in this movie that I guess it's grounded enough. Like, Irma la Douce doesn't feel grounded in any kind of reality to me. Or at least the 15 minutes of it I saw. But it did feel like I totally believed in that character, and I believed in the way she was that character, including when they strip off all her makeup and all that, which was, I thought, a she's a beautiful woman. She can be without, whatever fake eyelashes and all that and everything else that women would have been in movies in 1960. But yeah, she's really, really, really solid in this, and she keeps you with it so that you don't just feel like she's a manic pixie dream girl or whatever the 1960 equivalent would have been. She doesn't seem like a dim bulb that seems like she's below him.
Right.
I mean, he's an educated dude. There's, the character is, and he's playing it as a relatively smart guy who's really dumb about other people.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can't believe that he's a schnook that's getting taken. Right.
Right. And he's doing it, he's complicit in it. Like, he does get bullied into, like, people definitely, his bosses are definitely pressuring him to continue to give him, like, there's a point that reveals the sleeping pills where he's like, I've already taken a sleeping pill. What do you want me to do? I'm in bed. Like, and in that scene, the woman is, like a Marilyn, he's like, it's like a Marilyn Monroe joke. Because the boss guy wants to bring home this girl that's just like Marilyn Monroe, who does a pretty good Marilyn Monroe
She does
impression.
A very good Marilyn Monroe impression. It's good.
But that's definitely not who Shirley MacLaine is in the movie. She feels like a real person.
Yeah.
Probably more than anybody else in the movie. Yeah, she just feels really grounded and interesting. And in somebody else's hands, it could totally be a manic pixie dream girl of the 60s, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Someone would have overplayed it, been a little too hyper, whatever. I mean, even some of the stuff of like, you use that hand on me again in the elevator, you're going to lose it. I can see, it felt very natural. I thought it was a really good, a good bit. And I also, if we're watching the movie, Jamie was like, the secretary is my personal hero. She's just over it. She doesn't care if she's losing her job at this company. She's gonna, she's answering phones. She can go do that somewhere else.
Sure. She's been there.
Yeah.
She's seen enough. She's calling the wife. She's got nothing to lose.
Yeah.
We should talk a little bit about the Mad Men-esque, like, never since TGI Fridays have I seen such a meat market. Like, the office is like, people are out of control. The debauchery, the Christmas party is insane. And it did remind me of Mad Men. Just luckily nobody had a lawnmower in the apartment. But
we have to unpack so much from your last 40 seconds of talking now. So TGI Fridays, Laura and I recently found out.
I'm assuming only like 3 people are listening to this. The people that know. Go ahead.
Back in, I guess, when it was founded in the 70s, it was more bar than restaurant. And it was apparently, like, even as a chain, where you went to go hook up.
And I think maybe this is important, even though there is a bar scene where people hook up here. I guess in the time when it was created, people didn't really go to hotels for trysts as much. They would have to use an apartment. And they would meet people at parties or I guess at work. They didn't necessarily, other than the scene in this movie. I mean, I guess clearly it was happening to some degree in the bars, but for a certain level of respectable person, maybe like these bosses are, they had to find their ladies either in the telephone switchboard pool or so on and so forth.
Yeah. I mean, I think that all this stuff about like what New York was like post-war for about 30 years must have been, that we've seen in TV and movies must have all been based in some kind of reality. I'll just put it that way. Like the corporate culture thing of the boss chasing the secretary around the desk. Like once women were in the workforce in that way, and there were essentially like no HR groups, the personnel, but not HR.
Right.
And
there's definitely no HR in the apartment, by the way.
Yeah. I mean, when they started showing the party, I was like, oh, right. No HR. That was like literally came out of my mouth. But yeah, I mean, they packed as many extras as they could into the one set they had.
Yes.
And there's just people making out all over the place with this clear understanding of it's okay and it doesn't mean anything, maybe. And
it's the Christmas party. Yeah. And then we're just going to all go home and that's that.
Yeah. Yeah, which when you work for the state, as I have most of my life, that's the Christmas party is much more of like half a Jason's Deli sandwich and a bag of chips and an awkward speech by whoever's running the thing.
Yeah, all the Christmas parties. I'm just trying to think. There are probably some Christmas parties that with young people and young companies that got a little, I don't know, maybe HR should have been there, but like not like the apartment or like Mad Men, like not that far. But yeah, I don't know. It was just, you're like, oh, different times.
Yeah.
Different times.
Yeah, it absolutely different. Yeah, there's a reason a lot of offices don't do things like that anymore. I'll just put it that way.
And actually this movie includes some of those reasons.
Yeah.
Fred MacMurray, I did get to know him through like My Three Sons and like the Shaggy Dog stuff. And so it's fun to see him be a bad guy. I know he's a bad guy, sort of not necessarily a bad guy, but not a great guy in Double Indemnity, but it's sort of
you can say he's a bad guy in Double Indemnity.
Yeah, I mean he's a guy. I don't know. He's a guy trying to.
He decides the way to get what he wants is to murder someone. So he gets.
Yeah, that's not great. You're right. But like you're seeing it through his lens, so you're sort of rooting. And does that make sense?
Oh yeah, I mean,
versus this where you're just like you're terrible.
Hey, someone once pointed out to me that when you're watching Psycho and he's trying to sink the car and you're afraid it's not going to sink and you're like, please sink, please hide the body. And so you can continue killing. You're like, oh my God, what did Hitchcock just do? Like he got you on that guy's side.
Yes.
You should not be on his side.
You should not be on his side.
On Norman Bates' side. So, but yeah, it's the same sort of thing happens in Double Indemnity. But yeah, no, I think he's really, really good. And from what I understand about Fred MacMurray in real life was total square and family man. Like just, he was the, My Three Sons dad kind of was just who he was. And he, but yeah, man, he, and I think that's part of why he works so well in both Double Indemnity and this movie, because he seems so reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, you're just play it smart, buddy boy. Like we're helping each other. I'm not hurting anyone. You're not hurting anyone.
Yeah.
And you're benefiting like a madman out of all this stuff. I mean,
that's what's diabolical about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So wait, but you need somebody that you believe when he's sitting down with Shirley MacLaine and being like, "Oh, I'm going to leave my wife, and it's not working out, and hasn't been working out forever." And and then eventually his wife kicks him out, and then he goes back to Fran and is like, "Well, I did it." I left her.
Mhm.
But then at the same time, he's just a cad, just the worst. I'm gonna totally spoil it for everyone that okay, so this movie again, like we have before Christmas and then Christmas and then New Year's Eve, we have Sheldrake and Miss Kublik Fran at the Chinese restaurant again. I love that shot of when the lights went. This last time I watched it last week, when the lights go out for them to like say Happy New Year and the lighting switches, I gasped. I was just like, that is a gorgeous shot. And there's a few of them in this movie where you're just like, that's surprisingly good.
It's funny you should say that, because Jamie said, so you've seen this? And I said, yeah. I said, well, what do you and I said, but honestly, all I remember from it is the imagery. And I was like, I can't remember. I remember Shirley MacLaine was in a uniform. Is she an elf? Like
why is she in a uniform?
Yeah, I could not remember for the life of me what the setup was for how Sheldrake knew her or whatever. But it is for being shot in sets that, and I'm sure most of it was shot in LA. It's a weirdly beautiful movie. There's some things they do sometimes where they also split the screen in half. Where someone's on one side, and I'm not saying like there's an optical effect, but like the sets are that way and they use that. And so they're like the phone booth where Ray Walton's in there, I've got a Marilyn Monroe. And then you keep looking at the back of this woman's head who's on the other side of the screen. And finally she turns around. But yeah, it's a beautifully, beautifully shot movie. Without like resorting to like landscapes and Purple Mountain's majesty sort of stuff.
Right. So she's going to leave Sheldrake she finally realizes, because he says, we can't actually go to the apartment because, CC buddy boy, Bud, like won't give me the key. He said, especially not if I like, what did you do? Like, he won't let you in the apartment. And she realizes that, this guy she's with doesn't care about her at all. And this other guy did take care of her. And she runs from one place to the other. How many other movies do we have that in? Is that something that we think started here? I feel like that's a big trope.
I feel like this is where we need to pull Nathan Cohn in.
Right.
He'd be like,
this is where I'm like, I'm not the expert.
Yeah, he'd be like, in Sunrise, blah 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 happens. I'm like, oh, okay.
That's when it first.
Yeah. I don't know. I know it wasn't Miss Piggy and Kermit coming together. That can't have been the first time.
That can't have been number one. But you have that sort of scene. I mean, it's in like When Harry Met Sally. It's in so many things. But yeah, I was just like, is this? Anyway.
It seems almost, if I was to think about it, I wouldn't be shocked if Chaplin didn't do it at some point in the movie.
Right. Or you would think somebody doing the physical comedy in some silent film, some like either
but
Chaplin
he could be really sweet. I mean, in these movies and have a lot of depth. And so I don't know. But it is very well done.
So, but then even in the midst of this moment, we've seen this is Chekhov's gun. We've seen Jack Lemmon pull this gun out that he's packing. And then she comes up, she runs into the apartment building and up the stairs to the landing where his apartment is. And you hear a gunshot. And then he opens the door and it's a champagne bottle. But I think we hear a gunshot. I mean, it's not a gunshot. I mean, I don't think we're like in a magical realism situation, but I think they tricked us.
Using a gunshot sound effect?
Using a gunshot.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's not, I've opened many a bottle of champagne. It does not sound like a gun. They're two very different sounds.
Two different.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's and it echoes back to him thinking she's gassing herself.
Right.
And so
So I just feel like we should again say, like, it's a lovely holiday film and really beautiful. And also, just so you know, there's a lot of suicide content in it.
Yeah, the Everly Brothers feel like they should be playing over a good chunk of this movie. Yeah, it's and that's part of why I really liked it rewatching. I liked it the first time, but it had been a few years, so not entirely remembering all the details. But when you mentioned it, I was like, yeah, the Christmas tree. I remember the Christmas tree. I guess it's a Christmas movie. But I was really glad to get a chance to go back and revisit it, because my memory of it was the first time I watched it, not anticipating the turn it was going to take at the halfway point I thought it was going to stay like Some Like It Hot, never get serious.
No, that's why this film is so weird. And it kind of keeps switching back and forth. It's just interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. And, if when you're, I don't want to go down, haven't seen that many Billy Wilder movies, but when you are talking about like Sunset Boulevard, the comedy that's in it is so dark. You're like, is it comedy or is it just weird? Like, I'm not sure. I mean, the first time I saw Sunset Boulevard, I saw it at the Paramount, and the chimp funeral at the opening, I was just like, this is the best fucking movie I've ever seen. Like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be feeling right now. This is incredible. And especially opening as it does, So yeah, I think Wilder, now there's a lot of talk about like this movie has tonal problems. It's like, you mean it didn't keep hitting the same piano key for 90 minutes?
Right. And I'm not even sure, like, again, I'm not trying to modernize it, contemporary.
I don't think, I
too much, but
this movie is all over the map. You're not wrong, Laura. Like,
right. I'm just saying, like, yeah, it is interesting the way that, and I think we've seen a lot of movies since then have tried to do something similar with like, it's a romantic comedy, but also like really dark elements. And the way it ping pongs back and forth is just surprising to my modern sensibility.
They never made movies like this. I mean, it's not like in Bringing Up Baby, like, stuff suddenly gets dark,
Right. I mean, so It's a Wonderful Life clearly is like, it's sort of a feel good movie. And then there is obviously a major plot point is he's going to attempt suicide.
It's a Wonderful Life has this arc of depth of, it brings you in with all the like Norman Rockwell-esque nostalgia about like perfect small town America. And then it just drops you into this bin. And it has this incredibly sweet earned ending versus this movie is like zip, zap, like, he's sitting there wearing his bowler hat with the crazy lady on Christmas Eve. And then we're cutting back to Shirley MacLaine taking off her dress because she's just been handed $100. And it's like super depressing. And both of them are super depressing things.
Right.
It's just one of them's hilarious.
One's played for laughs.
Yeah.
And one isn't.
And I can imagine in the editing room, Billy Wilder was probably like, yeah, this is so good.
And it kind of is. It's really interesting. And I think it's worth watching just for that. I'm just going to say two more things, at least, about some of my favorite things. We talked about Shut Up and Deal. My other favorite line in this is, that's the way it crumbles cookie wise.
Yeah.
And then if there's another image from this, he does a lot of funny stuff, Jack Lemmon, but the tennis racket spaghetti was classic.
Oh, it's so good. And I can't believe I don't know if I've ever, maybe on TV, I've seen like Jack Tripper or somebody do it, but I can't think of anyone else trying to do it. And maybe because they're like, nah, we'd just be ripping off the best. Like, don't bother.
Right.
Yeah, it's such a good sequence, and just kind of the high he's clearly on having her there, and he's going to have dinner with her at like long last. And it's, in his apartment where he doesn't even ever get to be himself.
Right.
It's really a lovely, sweet scene until it's not, right? And until it gets interrupted by the character who's from a 1940s movie who pops up as the cab driver.
Who's her brother-in-law, which is also, I do understand why she just disappears over Christmas. I mean, her family must be beside themselves.
Yeah.
In New York City, like she just went away. We don't know where she is. And he shows up, and over again, Jack Lemmon in this movie is sort of taking on, he's protecting people and protecting her, but also, his bosses and people who do worse things than him. So
yeah, and that's kind of where I wanted to go with kind of the comment about him being a cipher towards the beginning here was he is kind of starting to now define himself even through the fabrication. I mean, it's all fabrications. He's willing to throw himself kind of in front of the various bullets for kind of everybody, which, I don't know exactly what he thinks the end game of all of it's going to be, but I guess we see that when he is giving himself like the dialogue he's going to go give to Fred McMurray, going up in the elevator and like, I'm going to take her off your hands. That whole speech. But
then at the end too, before she comes by, it's sort of great. You see him go from this anonymous desk to like the better, like a better office to a better office to the best office next to the boss to like handing back the executive washroom key that we started the movie with. Oh, I'm sorry, you gave me the wrong key. And it's like, no, I didn't. I'm leaving. And then he's just packing up his apartment and he's like, I don't know where he doesn't have any plans, but he's just going to stop doing the rat race of, whatever. The whole idea behind giving the key to the apartment to begin with was to sort of rise in the ranks. And then he rose and then he's like, I don't want it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, the doctor character is so important to this, to the story. And I can't even remember the character's name, for goodness sake. Dreyfus, Dr. Dreyfus. He's got he all he does is care about people, right? He's a doctor. He's the kind who has a medical bag who goes out in the dark of night to go help people. And, he's knows exactly what to do to help, Shirley MacLaine and pull them both out of this. And as you said, he stays up all Christmas Eve with them. And, his poor suffering wife, I felt so bad for that woman.
She makes chicken soup though. She very appropriately treats Jack Lemmon like crap because she thinks that he's the person who put Fran in that situation. And and his question to him then of are you going to be a human? Yeah, are you going to be a mensch a human being? And it's filling in all those blanks and kind of his cipher lifestyle of, or you can go forward, with your life and go actually do something. Now he means it more of, he misunderstands and he does think he's this party guy and, wants him to donate his body, but it's no less true. It's more true maybe because he's not even doing the party. He's not even that. He's not even living his life. He's sitting on a bench somewhere. Right. And when's that ever going to end? Now, I did logistically wonder why those guys didn't just get a hotel room at some hotel near the. So my understanding is like, you would still like, your hotels are not going to be rented out by the hour. No, I meant like permanently, as people used to do, get a hotel room. I guess I don't know if it's money or if it was a situation where it's like that would have still raised too many questions. Like wives might have seen money disappearing. Yeah. I don't know. Like, well, let's go back to Mad Men. Let's talk to some people who lived in the 60s. I don't have any experience with that. So I don't know what people used to actually do, but that was, I think it must've been enough of a real problem. There seemed to be stories of people using other people's apartments. That was enough of a real problem that you didn't want to be seen bringing in different women or to a hotel. That would not have
Yeah.
I don't know if he would have been arrested or just it wasn't done. I don't know. But
well, yeah, I'm sure hotel management didn't want that reputation with their hotel, if nothing else.
right.
I mean, we grew up just north of a place called Hotel or Motel Couple $18 or something like that. Well, I can't remember. They had this giant sign on I-45 that was blinking.
I remember the sign. I never stayed there.
Nor did I do know someone who did. The story is grim. It's as grim as you think it is.
I know I dated somebody at some point who I think did, because obviously every time you drove into the city, you passed it. So it was like hey, let's do it. Let's spend $18. and like, so I'm sure many people from our high school at some point did, but yeah,
they were real discriminating in their $18 an hour hotel, though, I'm sure.
Well, and I think those probably those places did exist. Somebody's going to have to like email in and be like, what were the logistics of cheating in 1960? I don't know.
We need to know. But yeah, no, and so, you're still in an era where, like, yeah, he says we've got to go to Reno for 6 weeks, and you're still in that kind of era before divorce became a lot more common and a lot easier to do across the United States. And I don't know exactly when the watershed was and if there was some legal precedent where they're like, no, you guys have to not make it this painful for all parties involved who are getting divorced. But yeah, I mean, it's I think it's The Misfits is the movie that starts where Marilyn Monroe's in the hotel waiting for her Reno divorce. Kind of starts all the action for the thing.
That's like in The Women, they go to Reno, right?
Yeah. Oh man,
lots of people going to Reno.
We need to watch The Women. That's such a good movie.
It's fun.
Yeah,
the old one, not the.
Oh, and yes, no new one. I want Rosalind Russell being obnoxious.
Yes.
But yeah, so yeah, the logistics and all of it have gotten. By the time we were coming up, it apparently was very easy. From my memory of how my parents' friends were mostly not together in first grade. Anyway. Thank you so much for bringing this movie.
Merry Christmas.
Yeah, Merry Christmas.
Happy holidays.
Yeah.
Be a mensch. Shut up and deal.
And if it's been a while since you've seen this one, I always assume if people have made it this far, it's because they've seen the movie and they're going on a journey with us.
Right.
If you've not seen The Apartment, by all means, I still remember the first time I'd heard of it because I was in film school, and this guy I was just graduated and I was running a little distance learning studio. So I had a lot of RTF students working for me. And this guy came in, he was like a freshman or sophomore. And I was like, you look really down. He's like, I just watched The Apartment for the first time. And I was like, what is this movie? I thought it was like a comedy with Jack Lemmon. He's like, it is. And I was like, oh my God. So I kind of avoided it for a while because I thought it was like going to be like Schindler's List or something. I didn't know what it was going to be. And I watched it, I was like, oh, this is like a super, okay, it's like an adult movie. And he was like 18 and couldn't handle the content. I get it. And that's kind of the fascinating thing about it now too, is like you get some of this stuff, in HBO TV or whatnot, but you're not going to get it at the movie theater anymore, which is kind of unfortunate. Well, that's not true. I totally walk that back. I don't watch enough indie movies to tell you what's going on out there. You watch a boat ton of indie movies that I don't.
Right. But there's something to be said for like, this is, like you said, this is an adult, it's for adults. It's got adult, I keep saying like adult content. I'm like, no, it's not like that kind of movie. But
he's a tennis pro.
The Apartment. No, it's not that, but it is. It's grown. It's a grown movie. And then it's sort of like, I feel like sort of the first of its kind doing this weird, this tonal tragicomedy thing. So yeah, I I guess I can understand why somebody was really down when they're 18 watching it. But like you said, it's not something that gets, I think it's something that gets its hat tipped to a lot. Like people do an homage to The Apartment, but you're right. There's not necessarily a lot other than Mad Men, I guess.
Yeah, including, I'm almost positive they designed the later seasons lobby based on this building. It was so similar. It was so similar. All right. Well, with that, we can let everyone go have a merry holiday. Whatever holiday you
whatever holiday
pursuing, or if you listen to this off year, happy 4th of July. But
Labor Day,
Groundhog Day. But Laura, again, thank you so much. It was a real treat to get to watch this, and it was a delight to get to do another podcast with you.
Yeah, thanks for talking to me. And I know, much like this movie, at times I was all over the place, but it was fun to talk it out, and good to be here.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. And we'll be back again soon. I think we got one more holiday one in the hopper, maybe two. We'll see what happens. But we'll be back soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
That about wraps it up for this edition of The Signal Watch, a production of the League of Melbotus. Thanks for sticking with us. If you enjoyed the podcast, we invite you to drop on by the Signal Watch blog, where you'll find write-ups of a wide variety of movies and more. We'd love to hear from you, so find us online and let us know what you think. Whether you prefer email, blog comments, or social media, we'll be happy to hear from you. We'll be back soon with more exceedingly high-quality content. So, until next time, God damn it, babies, you've got to be kind.